Yeah, it's only down here. Oh, look. You'll be fine. Oh.
Yeah, right there.
Where?
This is better.
Yeah, but those are got. Yeah. Not working. Well, that's just what it's doing. Once. That's just rare. It's just not taking it. Honey, are we in the right place?
Isn't it? Or hunt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where the flowers come from, you know? Very. Trying to get our hand. No, that's girl. Now, is it our book that was created, or there's one Newberry's? Or Newberry that they put together? Well, it's not working. Keep telling me. When it's not working, that's what we kind of put. Yeah.
Gotta go in right here. That's it.
Yeah. Well, honey,
It's that two, just leave it on.
yeah. We all
I'm sorry, you haven't fixed it. I just didn't want.
fine.
There, okay?
Yeah.
Hey. All right now?
I'm fine.
Yeah.
It'll be a lot better when Aaron Rodgers signed up.
You're right. Well done, Rob.
Well, no, I mean, just always they give away too much. You get to We, I'll say this a lot, they decided to do I mean, I don't care we agree or not.
It'd be okay if we did.
You guys going over them? I can pull out the gym. I could do.
There you go. Bob said you come over to pull up his stuff.
Actually, I got a brand new 1.75. Never know.
Colleen. You know what? I'm sitting right here.
Well,
yeah.
You should have just parked in the synagogue. What?
Not like this, but. Just the young man. Yeah, just. I will be there regardless, but.
the apartments out there.
Yeah, well. And I know people really would like to go up to
I'm not sure. Maybe I'll look at Are you there?
Somebody else wants to.
Where?
Here, somebody else wants to.
But he's like neat.
Well, I'm the closest relative.
Yeah, they're gonna say.
I know maybe if we do.
Hey, Dad, how you doing?
Not bad.
How's your oxygen?
Well, it's not working. Batteries dead. Take the batteries out and through it.
Yeah, the batteries are probably dead. Or batteries.
There's 2 AA batteries.
Triple.
Yeah.
But there's some going outside. Well, actually,
No,
when I
these
gave
are two different suits, actually.
Yeah.
Just to,
So how was your trip to
when everything was going on.
You're fine. Everything went well.
Huh?
Everything went well. It was very clean and stuff.
I'm back. This is what's
It's working again.
I'm like.
So what?
They are right. Oh, I'm sorry. They are over where the groupies over there. Right up in there.
Well, it's working for you. It ain't working for me. I can't find it.
Just keep the oxygen on. We have it on low.
Yeah.
right.
Here, back up.
It really does. I
Here, don't press it too long. I'm putting it to reset.
Oh, you're resetting.
Dad, let go of your thumb.
Well, really, but it's so long, it's
No. It just helped.
That's kind of a week. But you get home, finish
Yeah.
your batteries. Two breakfasts.
That was pretty good.
That was pretty good, yeah.
Nobody else would do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you this.
You okay?
This isn't a good time.
David, he heard, he knew I had my two dogs in the room upstairs.
I didn't give you
Another important part
Yeah, exactly.
Aussie. Didn't show up here. Aussie show up.
How you doing, buddy?
Right.
Really glad you came. I'm really glad you came.
Sure, yeah, the three of
You had a nice day. Yeah, so you have. Yeah, well, we've got 5 days to work on it, so. Good to see you. Man.
I'm Robert.
Yeah, Bob's got the pocket.
There you go. Yeah.
Yep.
Hi. That's a good choice. Yeah, it looks really nice, right? Yeah. Yeah, when we were looking at him, he remembered that when his Brian remembered that when his grandparents passed, she liked this style. Yeah, so hopefully Idette would also have really liked it or really appreciated it, you know. This one, we wanted color. Yeah. I know. I love this. I agree. I was like, I'm not gonna wear all black. Like
She told me.
you can change into it.
So is that?
That's my parents. Have you met them before? Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Met them at the
Let me say
wedding.
hi. Hey.
We walked in there. Oh. Size or what's wrong with this? Oh,
I didn't like the post. I just wish I pressed. Boston.
Boston.
You know what? I was online. It was an executive. And it was, I did it was.
Hello.
We were trying.
So.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are just upon service time. If I can invite you to come forward, kind of while you're comfortable keeping some distance, you can fill this area over here as well. And the most important thing is if we can ask you to silence your cell phones. There are plenty of extra chairs. The families already have theirs, so please don't be bashful and have a seat.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this sad moment. We have a hard job today. As you all know, we are gathered here so that we can say goodbye to Idette, Helene Hunt. And in a Jewish funeral, there are a couple of really beautiful traditions and obligations, in fact, that we have as the people who are here. But before we get to them, first, let me tell you, I'm Rabbi Emily Hyatt from Temple Emmanuel, and it's really an honor to be with you on this in this sad moment and to have heard so much of Idette's story and to get to share that with you in just a few moments. Before we begin our service, I'm going to ask Larry and Brian and Victoria, who are wearing ribbons, to, in just a second, to join me in tearing those ribbons. It's called Kriya, and this is how we begin Jewish funerals. And we're going to tear these ribbons for a couple of reasons. The first reason, as I explained to you the other day, the first reason that we tear is because this hurts. We're physical people. Sometimes it helps to do something physical. And back in the day, we used to rend our clothing itself. Now we rend ribbons in order to show our grief. The second reason is because this is an enormous tear in the fabric of your family. And we recognize that with the tear in the fabric on your lapel. And finally, as is especially, I think, pertinent in the life and times of Idette, you guys have spent a lot of time caretaking, on and off, sometimes more than others. But we know that she had moments of sickness over the last 18 years that required a lot of attention and taking care of her and recovery and help and logistics and planning and insurance and where is she and what does she need. And especially in the last few years, there's just so much of that. And when we tear, it changes our status from people who have to take care of details, from people who have to make sure that everything is handled, even planning a funeral, to people who just get to mourn. It's done. She's here, she's safe, everybody else is here where they're supposed to be. And now you just get to mourn, you don't have to worry. And so I'm gonna ask you, if you're comfortable, to repeat after me these words, Adonai Natan, Adonai lakach. Yehi Shem. Adonai mevorach. That means God gives and God takes away. Blessed is the name of God. And I'll ask the three of you to go ahead and just a 1/4 inch, tear your ribbon just a little bit. There you go. And now we say Baruch, Dayan, Ha'emet. That means praise are you, Adonai, our God, the judge of truth. And so we begin our ceremony today and the process of saying goodbye to Idette. And we have 3 different parts to a Jewish funeral. The first part is so that we can be prepared. We just get ourselves ready for this hard work. The second part, we tell the story of her life, a story that we couldn't tell until this week because we didn't know how the story ended. And the third part, we do the physical act of laying her to rest and saying goodbye. So let's put ourselves in the space that we need to be in to do that hard work. And I want to share with you to begin a poem. It's called I'm Standing Upon the Seashore. I am standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails to the moving breeze and starts for the blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength. I stand and I watch her until at length she hangs like a speck of white cloud just where the sea and the sky come to mingle with each other. And then someone at my side says, there, she is gone. Gone where? Gone from my sight, that's all. She is just as large in mast and hull and spar as she was when she left my side. And she is just as able to bear her load of living freight to her destined port. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just at the moment when someone says, there, she is gone, there are other eyes that are watching for her arrival and other voices ready to take up the glad shout, here she comes. And that is dying. Just as she is gone from our sight, we know that she has not changed. She is no smaller. The lack is in us as we remember her. And in Jewish tradition, we recite now Psalm 23. And it talks about the valley of the shadow of death. It says, even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you, God, are with me. My favorite interpretation of this reminds us that it's not our loved ones that we have lost that are in the valley of the shadow of death. It's us. That's what grief is. And there is even though the sun is beautifully shining today, there is a shadow. And we'll be in that valley for a little while. We're not in it alone. And we do come out on the other side with the memory of our loved ones and the ability in their honor to see the sun again. Adonai ro'i lo echsar bino deshayar b'tzeini amei menucho yinahaleni nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'magalei tzedek leman shemo gam ki elech b'gates al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorai Ishanta b'shem en roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yirtefuni kol yemei chayai v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orach yamim. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. And even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. And we have one final reading to prepare us for the act of telling the story of Idette. And especially in this place, I love this poem. The sky is so blue. The trees are, I don't know, maybe starting to bloom a little bit. And as Brian told me, we're not far from your grandparents, right? And this is a place where you have been over the years and where you have left memories and where you will come back in every season, no matter what the season. And so we say, in the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and the warmth of the sun, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we're lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. And as we turn to the part of this experience where we get to hear the story of Idette, the pieces of her life and legacy that we can only now look back on and understand, it is my honor to call her son Brian to say a few words.
It's only 3 pages, so don't worry. Let me paint a little picture. It's the 4th Thursday in November of any of the last 20 Novembers. My mom, dad, and most of the time myself would have just finished French toast and Canadian bacon, one of our many traditions, and would be getting ready to put a turkey in the oven. As our family, extended family, and friends who made our house the yearly Turkey Day stop grew over the years, so did the size of the turkey. I think the last one was up to 26 pounds, plus an additional 12-pound turkey breast. So you can get a sense of how many people would be coming. All would be calm at this point, but then my mom would tear into a mad dash around the house, cleaning, making sides, giving my dad and I our orders, and tossing in the occasional, well, why are you doing it like that? Every year, she would inevitably sit down halfway through the day and say, it's never going to get done. But it always did, because it meant bringing together so many people that she loved. Idette was a Denver native, which is a very important note, and grew up in Park Hill. And like me, was an only child. Growing up, she would hang out every weekend at her grandma's house on Bel Air with her cousins Frank, Gary, Kenny, Marv, and Vic and their families. Being an only child, she loved her cousins as siblings, sharing a unique connection with each of them. Wherever we go, whenever we go through old family photos, her favorite is always one with her, Frank and Gary wearing some toy cowboy guns, which I was just informed Gary had his cowboy gun taken away for some reason, in holsters, and a baby Kenny nearby. She loved all of you guys so, so much. After graduating from George Washington High School in 1970, she went on to Mesa State College and the University of Northern Colorado. While at Mesa, she met a group of friends who would become her second set of siblings. Start to get a theme here. Linda, Colleen, Zan, and Barb would spend most of their 20s together doing, I don't really know what. Those stories never seemed really to get passed along to me, but the one thing I know definitively was that they had fun. Their friendship would go on to last 50 years and was strong until the day my mom passed, and I'm sure will only get stronger. We would visit them and their families on vacations over the years, and as a young kid, I learned the importance of good friends by watching my mom and hers. In 1979, my mom started to work at Miller and McCollum CPAs as an assistant to a CPA who, if he's like me, and I know I am, was probably a gangly guy with some select facial hair and a good sense of humor. I wrote this in the obituary, but when my mom was first showing her parents a picture of my dad, her mom asked, which one is Larry? My mom responded, oh, he's the one that looks like Captain Kangaroo. If you don't know who Captain Kangaroo is, you can Google it. Pretty accurate. She would later leave the CPA firm in 1981, and on April 24th, 1982, she would go on to marry the captain, Larry. This began the best friendship and love either of them would experience. My parents made the life they wanted and had fun doing it.
They quickly began to build their own traditions and memories, traveling all over the country to sightsee and relax, but most always, and most importantly, to visit friends and family. In 1987, I was born and promptly ruined all of that. Just kidding. As an only child with a Jewish mother, I probably received 1 or 17 extra helpings of motherly advice and love. And luckily, over the following 5 to 8 years, Marissa would be born and I became friends with Brad. So some of that motherly love and advice could be deflected towards them. So thank you for that. And just to add, Brad and Marissa, who I know wants to be here, she truly loved both of you as her own children. My mom was just the best. She always supported me, built up my confidence when it was low, knocked me down a peg when it was too high, and was always there for everything. Usually when a kid tells their parents they want to go into the theater, it's met with some hesitation. Not Idette. She always encouraged me to follow that path, attending every play I was ever in, every show I directed, and later in life, some shows that I was just on the producing side of, which at the time meant nothing more than I refilled the coffee machines. But it didn't matter. She was there and always had a comment or two about the placement of my name in the playbill not being quite high enough. But growing up, my parents took me everywhere. We were a tight group and we still are. My mom was also the most courageous person I know. Her battle with cancer began in 2002 and was a rather continuous onslaught for the better part of the last 18 years. But up until 2 or 3 years ago, you'd never know it. But it became a big part of our lives, as cancer usually does. And we adapted, found the strength to move forward, usually from her, and lived full, happy, fun lives. In the last few years, things got tough. My dad is the other hero in this story. He took care of her, managed all the logistics of her treatments, and still had time to talk about Nikola Jokic's inevitable MVP win this year. Today is not about my dad, but to talk about my mom's life and not include the patience, strength, and love he gave to my mom would make it an incomplete story. As I thought about some underlying theme to wrap this up and send us into the rest of the day thinking about, I realized it was staring me in the face. Everywhere she went, she looked for siblings, people who she could be fiercely loyal to, support unconditionally, and most importantly, laugh with. I can't tell you how many times we would be someplace and somebody would be doing something a little weird or a little off, and my mom would lock eyes with you across the room. I know many of us have had this experience. And she would just start laughing uncontrollably, bringing herself to tears. She was laughing so hard. We all know that face. I hope we can all have those moments together today, this afternoon, and in the future. It's important to lock eyes with someone and laugh. Thank you, Mom, for everything. We will miss you so much. Love you.
Thank you, Brian, for those beautiful words. Those stories don't get less funny the second time. I want to share with you a poem called The Dash. It goes like this. I read of a person who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend, and they referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. They noted that first came the date of birth and spoke the following date with tears, but said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that they spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved them know what that little line is worth. For, as I think Idette would say, it matters not how much we own, the cars and the house and the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend that dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that still can be rearranged. And if we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real and always try to understand what other people feel, and be less quick to anger and show appreciation more for the love of the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. And when a eulogy is being read with a life's actions to rehash, we listen to all of these things that they say about how she spent her dash. And I learned that Idette Helene Hunt had a beautiful, rich, loving dash. A dash full of her people, her friends, connections, a dash full of helping others, of humility, but also of deep stubbornness, and most of all, a dash full of family. And so you heard the story of her dash. Brian just told you she was born here in Denver, born and raised, grew up, and lived in the state her whole life. But that's just the bones of the dash. So here's what else we know. We know that she had a dash that was full of compassion. Her college education trained her to be a special education teacher. She loved helping those kids, of being there with them in their needs, whatever they needed, understanding them. We know that she had a greeting card business later in her life, but what I learned about it was that it wasn't so much about the cards, it was about the time she spent stocking the cards. She would go to independent living facilities, which ended up sort of being her main source of card stocking, and she would stay for hours putting cards in slots and listening to the stories of the residents who so needed and wanted someone to talk to. And she loved it. There's an underlying theme in her life that she loved the underdog. She would go to bat and fight for the underdog every time. She always, no matter what it was that she was choosing, she would choose the thing that nobody else was picking because she felt bad for the thing that wasn't getting picked. And I think that's how she also felt about the kids that she taught. Maybe they didn't feel like they fit in, or they had what they needed to be like everybody else, and she would connect the most with them and give them an experience beyond what they could have gotten without her. She had a dash full of values. And I learned a lot about different values. One of them, I think, that you guys didn't say, but that I pulled out, was a dash full of authenticity. She was so genuinely herself all the time, unapologetically. She wasn't into flashy things, and she cared more about anybody's actions than what you were wearing or what you looked like. It took a little while to understand her mentality of individuality is cool. She wasn't quite like the other moms, but what was so amazing about her is that it didn't faze her. She wanted to do what she felt was right. She had a dash full of tradition. That's another value. When Brian was young, they participated at Stepping Stones, a program for religious education for interfaith families that Temple Emmanuel used to run. They felt it was important for Brian to authentically learn the traditions from both of the faiths of his parents. And so they had a great learning experience. He went to Israel. Brian got to have a bar mitzvah in Israel. And then they would go and experience Larry's traditions and immerse themselves in that. When Idette's parents passed, they would always remember to go to synagogue to say the memorial prayer on the anniversary of their deaths. It was a tradition that was passed down to her that she really carried. But she also had a dash, I think, that was full of fun and funny. I know that she and Larry and Brian went to Vegas every year. They didn't gamble, didn't matter. They went to shows, they went to the pool, they ate good food. And I think Brian started going like as soon as he could walk to Vegas on the family trip. And I learned that, Larry's a big sports fan. So I'll probably know that. And he told Idette that if she was going to be married to him, that she had to get on board with that hobby. And she did. And they've had season tickets to the Nuggets for 40 years. She's been to more games than anyone. She loved it. She loved going and rooting for random players that she felt these weird connections to. She knew that if she went because she wanted to see a player, that player was going to be sidelined and that they weren't going to play. But she went anyway. And I think that she went because it was what she got to do. It was what she wanted to do with her family. Maybe she ended up loving basketball, but I think what she really loved was being with the guys. And they played a lot of golf. Idette didn't play golf. Idette drove the golf cart. Idette held the beer. But she loved to go. She loved to be with them. She loved to spend the time. And all of the travels and all of the cruises and all of the musicals that they've been to over the years, all the times they traveled to New York to see Brian get coffee for a show, as you heard. She was an adventurer in that way, always ready to have fun. She had a dash full of love. She was an excellent friend. And because, like you heard, she was an only child, she was always collecting people, collecting family. She was the connector and the initiator. And she checked on everyone. She kept everyone together. She had a dash full of love as a wife to Larry. They were best friends. They had a lot of common interests. And he says he loved her sense of humor and her wit. She would, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not paraphrasing, I'm quoting. She would tell him to get bent. And that was fine because that was the nature of their relationship. But here's what's really powerful. Larry said he was 31 years old when he met her. And he'd been in the army. And when he came back, he was floundering, trying to figure out what to do with himself. And when he met Idette, he was home. He was floundering no more. He was just lucky to have found her. And as a mom, she was pretty great. She was always there to support Brian, to drive him around. She put rules in place that at the time felt totally arbitrary, but later in life, he has been able to identify that they made so much sense. They made him curious about the world, but with safe parameters around him. And she never let his self-esteem drop. She always reminded him how great he is. And she built up his confidence in himself. She believed in his dreams, but without putting pressure on him. And she was a wonderful mother-in-law to Victoria. She showed Victoria how to love a family so strongly and so fiercely, how to bring them together, how to demonstrate what's important to you, how to share what is special to you so that everyone can join in. She created a family, said Victoria, where everyone could be honest, where you didn't have to worry about whether you were going to keep a secret because you didn't have to. She was welcoming and had open arms. And finally, she had a dash, just like Brian said. We picked the same word, even though we didn't say it on Tuesday, full of courage. Even though she was sick on and off for the last 18 years, for a lot of that, she didn't really let it show. And it wasn't always obvious how much she was going through because she didn't really let it out. And only now, looking back, can we see the amount of strength that it must have taken for her to find her way through 2 decades of fighting cancer. And she fought hard against a whole lot of different kinds of cancer all the way until the end. And so as we look back on this dash, on this tiny little dash, we know that it is rich and beautiful, full of strength and honesty and authenticity, full of love and family. And that's the best thing about the dash. It's tiny. We can carry it with us when we leave this place, and we can take it wherever we go. That dash, as full as it is, it doesn't take up so much space. And so today, as we prepare to bury this love and loving wife, mom, mother-in-law, teacher, neighbor, listener, cousin, friend, someone whose life took up enormous space in our hearts, we are comforted knowing that we have our dash to take with us. Her stories, her legacy, her lessons, and her love as we say goodbye. And so in just a moment, you'll hear the traditional words that we say in Jewish tradition as we begin this process of physically laying Idette to rest, making sure that she is in this place of peace and safety. Adonai Natan Adonai Lakach Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Yatzar Etchem Betuvo Vehemitatchem Badin Venata Betochechem Chaye Olam Baruch Atah Adonai Dayan HaEmet Atah Gibor Leolam Adonai Rav Lehoshia Mechal Kel Chaim B'Chesed Mechayer Hakol Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim V'Rofech Olim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Micha Mocha Ba'al Gevurot Mijam Elah Melech Meimit Umechaye Umatmiach Yeshua Baruch Atah Adonai Notea B'Tochenu Chaye Olam Dayan HaEmet Shofet Tzedek Ve'emet Baruch Dayan HaEmet Yichol Mishpatav Tzedek Ve'emet Nefesh Kol Chai V'Yadecha Tzedek Mal'a Yamincha V'Yadecha Rachem Apli Tatzon V'Yadecha V'Tom Ar L'Malach Teref Yadecha Gadol Ha'itza V'Rav Ha'aliyah Asher Einecha B'Tuchot Al Kol Derachei B'nei Adam Latei La'ish Kidracha V'Kifri Me'alalah Lahagi Yashar Adonai Suri V'Lo Achlatavo Adonai Natan Adonai Latach Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach V'Hurachum Yechaper Avam V'Lo Yashti V'Hir Ba Lehashiva Po V'Lo Ya'ir Kol Chamato. We have an opportunity now to actually do what I think is one of the most beautiful and difficult traditions that we have in Judaism. We ourselves, as mourners, as grievers, as those who are heartbroken, we participate in filling this grave with earth as we say goodbye to Idette. It is so beautiful because in our tradition, we teach that this is one of the few things that she can never say thank you for. We do it just for her out of the love that we have for her in our hearts. I heard it recently compared to tucking someone into bed, making sure that they are truly at peace before we leave this place. So in a minute, I'm going to invite Larry and Brian and Victoria to start. There is a shovel here. Our tradition says the following things. It is customary to do 1 to 3 shovelfuls of dirt, of earth into the grave. And we do the first shovelful with the back of the shovel. It's a very inefficient way to move earth. And yet it's because it's hard. And this is hard. And so we do it in a way that represents the difficulty and the heartbreak that we feel. It's hard to listen to. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to offer. So Larry and Brian and Victoria, I invite you to come on up and take the shovel and go ahead. Can we take a moment of silence as we because there's so many of us today, if after the ceremony you want to participate and contribute by putting some of the earth either with the shovel or your hand into the grave, I invite you to do so. And as we prepare to conclude our ceremony, I ask you all to please rise for the El Mali Rachamim, which is our memorial prayer. El Mali Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim Kazohar, Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Idette Helene Hunt, Shehalacha Leolama, Bal Harachamim Yasireha, Beseter Knafav Leolamim, Bitzror Achayim, Et Nishmata, Adonai Hunachalata, Betanuach L'Shalom, Al Mishkava V'Nomar, Amen. God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one, Idette Helene Hunt, who has gone into eternity, find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold her close to you forever, so that her soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May she find a home with you. May she rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. And now we say our final prayer, which is called the Mourner's Kaddish. It's what's inside your cards, you guys. There's a prayer in Aramaic that doesn't talk about death. Actually, it talks about the beauty of life and what's possible. And what a fitting end to a ceremony for Idette, who I think, given what I know, would probably have preferred that we think about the beauty of life rather than the sadness of death in this moment. And this is the prayer that she so devotedly said on behalf of her parents at the anniversary of their passing every year. And so in her name, we recite these words together of the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah ve'alma divra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha brichu le'ela minpul birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata ta'amiran ve'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, huya aseh shalom, aleinu va'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who makes peace on high make peace for us and for all of Israel, and we say together, Amen. Lech ki shalachacha Adonai. Go your way, for God has called you. Lech ve'Adonai yihiyeh imach. Go your way, and may God be with you. Ve'halach lefanecha tzidkecha kevod Adonai yasfecha. May your righteousness go before you, and the glory of God precede you. And we say in conclusion to our mourners the same words that we say to all mourners in Jewish tradition. Hamakom yinachem etchem b'toch sha'ar avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. It means may God comfort you amongst the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. That concludes our service today. Thank you all so much for being here with us.
I don't know.
I would have trouble spelling. Yeah, so. I mean, I could. Yeah, I guess I could. The trick is. Yeah. You know, I'm
This is why I told you
Good.